You're watching World Talks on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Let's go to Sofia tonight, where the Bulgarian government has resigned after mass street protests over its economic policies and a perceived failure to tackle corruption. The political drama broke out just before the country's parliament was due to vote on a no-confidence motion on Thursday, and comes weeks before Bulgaria joins the Eurozone. Joining me for more is Garvan Walshe, CEO of AI Article 7 Strategies and co-founder of Unhack Democracy. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Walshe, can we start at the beginning? How did we get to a world where Bulgaria's government was forced to walk again? Did this come as any surprise?
Well, it happened because they tried to pass this budget during the lunch break of a session a couple of weeks ago, and this really galvanized people. There was opposition building up to tax rises in the budget. People didn't think that the money would be spent fairly. They thought it would be there would be improper oversight and a huge risk of corruption. A lot of this has got to do with a figure, one of the supporters of the government, a guy called Dejan Pevsky, who has been a fixture in Bulgarian politics for a long time, and there have always been repeated protests against him and his activities because a lot of the public consider him corrupt. So they have, in 2013, there were protests against him. In 2021, again, and this is the sort of third round. Any government that involves this figure, who is himself under sanctions by the Magnitsky Act and also by the United Kingdom, any government that involves him ends up running into trouble because a lot of Bulgarians are extremely suspicious of the style of government and the honesty or lack thereof such a government would have. So we had this for about a week and a half ago. We had the first set of protests after the budget, and then we had this other one related to the no confidence motion. The government really understands that there is a lot of anger, and members of the government think better to resign now. Let's go to another set of elections, and maybe they can salvage some of their reputation and some of their electoral strength. This particularly applies to the Garb party, which is kind of the biggest party in the coalition and is a centre-right. Someone wonderfully described them as a centre-right populist party, which I think is a fair description.
Can you spell out for me, you mentioned the protests, what was different about these protests that laid on so much political pressure?
They were just simply much larger. They seem to have been the biggest ones across Bulgaria since the collapse of communism. They didn't just happen in Sofia, but they happened in a number of other cities, including smaller towns that normally don't host protests against the government. So it was quite clear there's a lot of anger, and the government, I think, has chosen to try and evade the anger rather than confront it head on.
And many of the accusations surrounded systemic corruption. They surrounded this disregard for the rule of law. What are some of the examples of that we're talking about?
We're talking about a situation where you have what would best be described as a selective prosecution of the mayor of Varna. You have significant amounts of corruption. Bulgaria is very low in the Corruption Perceptions Index. There was a EU-led attempt to ensure that the judiciary could be reformed, but the captured Supreme Court managed to find a way to prevent those reforms taking place. Those should have taken place about 2 years ago, but they never got enacted. So people are pretty frustrated that no matter what happens, they don't seem to be able to get change through the normal political process. That's why they've taken to the streets in such large numbers. And the word that comes out when you talk to Bulgarians about the attitude of this government is arrogance. It seems that they've decided that after 4 years in which there were elections every 6 months, people got tired, this government got cobbled together, and then they felt like they owned the place. So people are fuming at the way the government has chosen to rule, and that's why they came out in huge numbers. That's why they were demanding new elections. And it probably means that the election results in those elections are likely to be a little bit different than the ones in the previous 2 or 3 electoral cycles.
And those huge numbers were led often by Gen Z. I mean, are we seeing a kind of generational revolt in Bulgarian politics, particularly given what you mentioned there? I mean, a 6th Prime Minister in 5 years, so much instability.
I mean, we're seeing it's a sort of stable instability because it's a very similar parliamentary makeup. The governments just don't last. A lot of the prime ministers are technical governments. They try and put a political one together. And this is Gen Z really saying, you know, they expect more of their government. They expect a higher standard of governance than Bulgarians have had before. They want to see more efficient public services. They want to see more honest government. They want to see less corruption. And they're combined also with returning immigrants. So Bulgaria had a big emigration since it joined the EU, but in recent years, a lot of people have been coming back to Bulgaria, and they've lived elsewhere, and they want to bring what they've learned from those other countries back to Bulgaria. They want to see stronger governance in Bulgaria, and they want to see a more honest political system. And so Gen Z had thought to have been, people thought they were pretty disillusioned by this, but actually they've come out in large numbers. They're saying they're not going to tolerate the old way of doing things, and they want to see change.
Let's talk about the introduction of the euro next month in Bulgaria. Does this political crisis put the transition at risk, or at the very least disrupt it at all?
No, not at all. This has been planned for a long time. And anyway, Bulgaria has had a currency peg with the euro, even before then with the Deutschmark. So the currency has always been completely stable. There's no financial market risk here. This process will happen in an orderly fashion. For the last 6 months, as you'll remember from the Polish other transitions to the euro, not of course the Polish one, it still has its zloty, but in other transitions to the euro, you have a period where prices are listed in both euros and leva. My own Bulgarian bank account is being converted from leva to euros. Everything is going to happen in euros next year. There are some fears of inflation, but also because of the currency peg, there's much less to actually do in the Bulgarian case. It's really just renumbering the denomination of the currency.
I'm interested, how does this, in your words, stable instability play into the hands of the likes of Russian influence? Despite, of course, Bulgaria being both an EU and NATO member, do we see Russia having a hand in Bulgaria in that way?
I mean, there's a lot of talk now about the president, who's a guy called Rumen Radev. He is pro-Russian, and there's a lot of talk of him entering politics in the parliamentary sense and setting up his own political party. So one of the key questions is if he runs in April or if he runs again in any subsequent elections around the same time as the presidential election next autumn, will his party be able to win support, particularly from, it's most likely to win support from the far-right nationalist parties that have recently been doing well in Bulgaria. Can he take their votes over? And if so, Radev, who is personally quite popular, will he be able to consolidate that vote and maybe become one of three big blocs the next parliament, between the other ones being Gerb, the outgoing centre-right populists, and then also the We Continue the Change, which is the liberal reformist party that has been leading this round of the protests.
We're running out of time, but briefly, what happens next for Bulgaria? I mean, how do you see the next days and months playing out?
Well, I think we're going to have a technical government, and once that's over, we'll have elections in the new year, and then those elections are likely to produce another fragmented parliament. We have these three blocks. The relative size of those blocks will matter, but it's very difficult to see a Radev-led bloc cooperating with either Gerb or We Continue the Change. What you tended to happen is a series of arrangements in which We Continue the Change and Gerb have had to somehow get along despite being opponents, and despite many of these protesters being very suspicious of Gerb and its style of government. So a lot will depend on the relative strength of these three groups, but we're going to see continued fragmentation, and in a sense, this stable instability will carry on. But if the proportions of those parties change, we might see a more reform-minded Bulgarian government that is able to at least achieve partial change and take partial advantage of its joining the euro and the economic benefits that will come from that.
Mr. Garvan Walshe, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. Do stay with us for more. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.